chapter-wide penalty is on line 59. I'm sorry, it's on line 60. Rather, line 61. The actual class 1 misdemeanor reference is on line 61. There's a separate penalty for obstructing or impeding the commissioner, and that's on line 55 and the following lines. That's a class 2 misdemeanor. If we make it class 2 throughout the whole act, there's no need to specify this different penalty for impeding the commissioner because it's the same penalty throughout.
Could you tell us, Scott, how that compares to what the federal penalty is?
Mr. Chairman, it's my understanding that the federal law gives a few different options for states. They can adopt a sentence that's a maximum 1 year in jail, or a fine, or both. As it was originally drafted, it provides a class 1 misdemeanor. That is on the high end of the options provided by the federal government. If we were to take it down to a class 2, that would still qualify, but it wouldn't be as severe a punishment.
It would be a lesser punishment.
And Mr. Chairman, that was a concern of mine when I looked at the bill after it was drafted. So Scott did the research, and what we tried to do is make the punishment the least it can possibly be and still comply with the federal law.
And you made that motion that the amendment be adopted. Second. Probably moved in second. All in favor of that? I'm sorry, Senator Evans. I'm sorry.
I heard Scott say that we could do the fine, the criminal penalty, or either or both. So, I mean, if we're looking at the least lowest sanction that were permitted under federal law, can we eliminate the criminal penalty?
Mr. Chairman, it's my understanding from talking to FEDAX that the bill as proposed as an administration bill didn't go all the way, but it was in the upper middle part of the possible range. And by taking it down to class 2 misdemeanor, we would still qualify under the federal law. We would pick one of their options, but it wouldn't be the most severe option.
I guess, Mr. Chairman, I will just ask this question. Scott, is it possible for us to just give a fine on this without classifying as a misdemeanor, is what Senator Obenshade is asking?
I don't know, I'm sorry. Depends on the federal.
I thought you said either or both. And we can eliminate, I mean, if either is an option, I would go eliminating the criminal penalty.
Do you want us to, Mr. Chairman, do you want us to carry this by for the day and research that?
I don't want to ask that. Can we carry it back temporarily?
We'd have to be willing to come up and speak to this issue. Apparently not. Okay, here we go. Well,
Sandy Adams, Commissioner, Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. What's our question? I'm sorry, I missed it.
we're discussing the penalties.
We would have to check on that. I don't think we have our policy person in the room right now. My understanding is that we just need to be in compliance with federal law, and the misdemeanor and/or, I don't know of a case, and we have this in other code sections where we've penalized and done a misdemeanor. I can't think of a case since I've been a commissioner where we've had a misdemeanor. I think they should just for various egregious acts, but we would have to check on that.
Is it possible that you could get that information while this meeting is going on?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
If we do that, we will, this is action carried over.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
just one quick question while we have you. Are there any federal dollars at risk here if we don't do this?
Mr. Chair, Senator Morrison, yes, this is all a federally funded program. So the dollars, we actually have dollars now. The first 2 years of the produce safety rule are just pure education. And so we've got federal funding now in the first year to do education, and we're partnering with Virginia Tech on that.
Mr. Chairman, so if we don't pass this bill, then there would be monies would go away for this program, and not for anything else that BX does related to federal spending.
Mr. Chair, Senator Morrison, yes, that's correct. We have federal dollars just for this program.
Mr. Chairman, while you're checking on one thing, maybe you check on a couple of others. Senator Stewart and I suppose BDAX, I appreciate the amendment that we just adopted. It said that reg is repealed, then this goes away too. And we're a little bit in uncharted territory right now with respect to what's going on in Washington. And, I don't know whether a repeal is the only option. And if for some reason, some executive order is entered that increases the use of funds to fund this, or the department ceases to enforce it without repealing the reg, it would be nice if this also encompasses that. So my suggestion would be to consider whether we could add a provision that says that if funding disappears in addition to the reg being repealed, I don't think you all want to enforce it if the funding is there to enforce it. That's my number one. Number two is I would be curious as to, and this is, I think you all do a great job, and I think that Sandy does a great job at BDAX. Some folks who have communicated with me have concerns about forfeiture-related issues, and they don't want fines being collected under this and being used to fund the activities of the department. And I would suggest and wonder whether you'd be open to fines that are recovered under this being diverted to the Clean Water Fund for funding best management practices.
Mr. Chair, Senator James, we would have no problem with that. I don't know where we get fines that we could even fund a program anyway.
It just would solve a little bit of heartburn.
Yep, that'd be fine, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it. You will get that information.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if, and I don't know what your feelings are on this bill, but if you decide that you want to vote it out and we can get that information either from Sandy or Scott, I'm amenable to bringing a substitute to the floor. Because frankly, I want it to be the lowest punishment we can possibly be. And I thought we'd gotten there with the class 2, but if we can go beyond that, I'm happy to bring that, to put it on, if it gets out of here.
I think that most committee is in agreement that when I first read it, it seemed awfully horrible legislation. I think I explained to you that last week, so I'm glad that you were able to work out at least as much as the other.
Mr. Chairman? Sir. And I wasn't sure whether you were asking us to vote on it right now.
We're not going to take a vote on something.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, there are folks who come to speak. Can they do that?
If you want to open it up, because I think a lot of the folks in the room want to talk about this bill, but I understand if you want to go ahead and do that. That's your bill.
I think it would, some people would appreciate it if they could go on and say what they need to say about it.
Okay. All right, who's the first witness? And your name is?
Mr. Chairman, I'm Katie Frazier with the Virginia Agribusiness Council. The reason that I requested that Senator Stewart see if we could take testimony now is I have Kevin Kirby with me today. He's a produce farmer from Hanover County that left a pretty sunny day in January. You don't get too many of those when it's 60-degree weather and you can be outside working on the farm to come down and speak to you about this legislation. So I'm going to let Kevin speak first and then I'll follow up with some closing comments from the Virginia Agribusiness Council in support of the legislation.
Well,
Good afternoon, Kevin Grove at Kirby Farm from Mechanicsville, I'm a fourth generation farmer. We know we're gonna have to comply with this law. In our relationship with FDA and VDAX in the last 6 years with complying with food safety regulations, we much prefer VDAX. It's a whole lot faster process. We can get in contact with the people we need to get problems solved. When we get involved with FDA, all we get is a hammer thrown at us, and we don't get any feedback. And we would really appreciate if we could get VDAX in charge of this. We do understand it, we have to comply, understand that. We don't like it, but we understand it. And we would just much rather see VDAX as a helpful tool with us complying with all this. That's just, Jesus, my life.
Mr. Chairman, I think Kevin put it pretty bluntly as to the reason that the Virginia Agribusiness Council supports this legislation. I will also share that we have heard stories from neighboring states where FDA has come into a produce operation in a state just south of us. They issue a stop sale order on the produce, and it takes them quite a bit of time to get there to follow up on that. And produce is a perishable product, so every day that goes by that you can't sell that product is a day that you're losing business. And I think we all know the folks at the Department of Agriculture, and you at least know where to find them right up the street here, so that we believe that that would be a more timely and efficient process. And they have a history of working with people to bring them into compliance. So I think those are some of the reasons that our industry and our membership feels that this is really an important piece of legislation in that we do have to comply with the federal law. I'll also say, I think many of you have received some talking points. It does outline the exemptions under the federal law. I know there's been a lot of questions and confusion about who this law would apply to. I won't go through ad nauseum all of the federal exceptions to the rule, because I get confused between lima beans and black beans as to which one is exempt and which one is not. But I will say that, you know, the National Departments of State Departments of Agriculture has estimated that of 2,300 vegetable farms in Virginia, about 400 would need to come into compliance under the law. So it's not every small produce operation in the state that's selling produce. It's folks like Kevin who are making a living selling the produce across state lines. Thank you.
Well,
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Wilmer Stoneman. I represent the Virginia Farm Bureau Federation. We support Senator Stewart's action for all the reasons that he had mentioned. We believe that the exemptions are significant. This won't affect the small growers, the people that deal with you every day on a regular basis. This is about interstate commerce and those large producers that need to have some expectation of food safety. I think, without question, the federal rule is here, and the amendments that have been put on the bill should give us some comfort that if something does change at the federal level, this will change as well. I think that's a good provision to put on a lot of bills that we're considering this year. And I think it provides my members the comfort that they need to move this bill forward. Thank you.
well, would you explain to us the difference between your definition of a large farmer and a non-large farmer?
I'm a large farmer. And I have discussed, you know, differences in size of farms and all that, but in this particular case, you know, what we're about is making sure that food safety is taken care of. You know, those producers that produce less than $25,000 of income from produce are exempt. Those people that produce something in the excess or lower than $250,000 of produce can be qualified as exempt. And so there are enough bells and whistles where those people that are making a lot of money doing interstate commerce, and where people can't see the farmer nor the production, you know, their food safety is taken care of. But those folks that are at the farmer's market every weekend should feel fairly comfortable that they're not affected. And then there's some middle ground in there for that protection as well. And so we feel very comfortable that there are enough exemptions and qualifications that most people won't be touched. As Katie said, You know, there's only 400 farmers in Virginia that would even become close to being affected by this bill.
Any questions? Thank you. Is anyone else speaking for the bill? Is anyone speaking against the bill? Well, come on.
My name is Richard Altus. I represent Virginia Independent Consumers and Farmers Association. This is my friend Josiah Tillett. He is also as a member. First off, I think you could admit it. This is a bad bill when you put a sunset clause on it, but you think it's bad federal law. And the Trump administration is in good likelihood going to remove it. At the onset, I don't care whether it's small farmer or large farmer. If the government has free access to your property, that's against the Fourth Amendment. With the Sherrard versus Cullen decision, it says that there must be an injured party before the government can come on your property, and the government cannot be the injured party. And then there's the anti-commandeering clause that's brought forth by 4 Supreme Court cases: Craig versus Pennsylvania, New York versus United States, Prince versus United States, and Independent Business versus Studious. The states cannot be forced to implement federal rules and regulations. And I think that in this case that this is not people's wish that we implement federal regulations. And lastly, I go to the Virginia Constitution, Article 2, Section 7, your oath of affirmation, governments instituted to protect the unalienable rights of the property of the people. And you have to bind an oral written contract with the people of the Commonwealth to do this. And I think that you are mandated with this oath to kill this bill.
I'm Josiah Tillett, board member of Virginia Independent Consumers and Farmers Association. I do appreciate your time, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I just want to say I do appreciate the good faith efforts to amend some of the more objectionable parts out of the legislation. With that said, I sincerely believe that this bill does not have enough redeeming qualities to justify a yes vote. I have some serious civil liberties concerns, some Bill of Rights concerns as it pertains to the search and seizure, and as it pertains to the, well, kind of how the funding gets right back into the enforcement process. I know some of that's been addressed, but you know, having these fines and fees and having the inspections, I don't think there's really just cause for all of that, and I would caution you against taking a step, a regulatory step this big to enforce the federal law, as Richard said, that, you know, let the feds worry about their own laws. We don't need to take that extra step, go that extra mile for the federal government to carry out and enforce a law that's not even a good law that they have on the books. I would rather see the Commonwealth of Virginia and this government be invested in protecting the rights of the citizens and representing you know, the people and the voters that put you in office, as opposed to representing DC to those voters, if you get my drift. So I very much appreciate your time and your consideration. I ask you to vote no. Thank you.
Well,
I just want to add, my name is Lois Smith. I'm president of Virginia Independent Consumers and Farmers Association, also known as VICFA. We don't feel it's a very good idea to try to limit Virginia farmers to under $25,000 before they have to go through all these regulations. If it is interstate, it's a totally different ballgame. But as far as that goes, I think it's a bad idea to tell Virginia farmers they can only make $25,000 before the government comes on their farm. Thank you.
thank you. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Joanna Berger. I'm also with VICFA, Virginia Independent Consumers and Farmers Association, and I have a master's degree in agricultural sciences from the University of Edinburgh. I just am not comfortable with the wording of the bill. I have read it, and I'm not comfortable that small farmers are safe from this, the way that it's worded. I would like small farmers to be more clearly protected. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else to speak? Senator Peters.
I have a question for the patron, and I guess Senator Stewart, hearing some of these concerns and just looking at this bill, what would the standard be for the agency
come on somebody's property and cite this penalty or search their property? Is there probable cause, reasonable suspicion? I mean, what's the standard here?
Mr. Chairman, I probably should let VDAX respond to this, but I would simply say, I think we would have a lot to do with the standard if we keep it as a state program and enact this. I'm not sure we'd be able to have anything to do with it if we don't enact this and the feds do the inspections.
Follow the question, follow. And if we are to make that, and I understand exactly what you're saying, if we are to make this a state program, is that something we need to have in this legislation? So there's some guidance to the agency?
Mr. Chairman, I would think VDAX is capable of making the determinations to do these inspections. They're a reasonable agency. I'm concerned about the federal government doing the inspections, quite frankly. But I'm with many amendments that the committee thinks are prudent. I think it's going to go by for the day anyway.
Well,
Good information.
I'm assuming that the language here is lifted from federal language somehow, somewhere, with the idea being that this is what we had to do in order to get past the requirements. We use our own inspection, so we use VDAX. Is that right?
What I had tried, I didn't draft the bill. It was an agency bill to start with. What I've tried to do is make changes such that it makes it the minimum we have to do and still comply with the federal law, so the federal government doesn't come in here and do these inspections of our farms. That's the best way I can answer that. I hope it's the minimum we have to do.
Just, I guess, maybe it's more appropriately addressed to VDAX. I just want to make sure, I agree with Senator Stewart, I want to do the exact same thing, but I don't want to tinker with this language if we're going to cause problems with the feds, so.
Mr. Chair, Senator Lewis, this was drafted similar to the language that's in the code now with our food inspection program for establishments and also our dairy services inspections, which we do in compliance with FDA guidelines. Does that answer your question?
Senator Marshall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the patron or VDAX, are we having a problem with food safety? Is this going to improve food safety in Virginia, or is it just another way of doing what we're already doing, and we're just trying to keep the feds out?
I'm not aware that we're having a bunch of problems. Unfortunately, what happened was this Federal Food Safety Act was passed by Congress, and it requires us to do this, and we have two choices. We either adopt the state program and let VDAX do it, and if we don't want to do that, and that's up to this committee, then the federal government, the FDA, will come into Virginia and they will do these inspections themselves. Those are our two choices under federal law. I'm sorry, produce. I don't want to scare all the farmers.
I think that the policy person may come in. I don't know whether I'm going to try and say what I think I learned, and let the department correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that the answer to my question about the either or, the civil penalty and the criminal sanction is that they're not sure. But they think that if we adopt a civil sanction only, that the likely result would be if the federal government disagreed with whether that was compliant. I think given the trajectory, I would be very surprised if they communicated that message. But if they did, their likely response would be, you ought to revisit it and consider making a change. So unless the department disagrees with me, I would suggest that we remove the criminal sanction altogether.
Can we hear from whichever one?
Charles, our deputy Commissioners here to correct me if I say this wrong, but I believe that is true. As I said before, the first 2 years of this are just education and outreach. So we won't really be doing any inspections anyway. So I think if we found out that we made a change that would take us out of compliance with FDA guidance, we can come back next year.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Black.
how long have we gone without being in compliance? This has been going on for quite a while, isn't it?
The Food Safety Modernization Act was passed in 2011, but the produce safety rule, to which the speaks to, was passed last January. And even at FDA level, it's just education and outreach right now. So we're not out of compliance, so to speak. But when the inspections start, it's a question of whether we do the inspections or FDA.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Black.
I guess my concern is I watch the news like everybody else, and the president has said he's going to slash the regulation 75%, and he's given authority to the departments to apply them loosely. In other words, in ways that will not be restrictive to business activity, agricultural activity, whatever. So I just, and it's a great bill, and I applaud the effort, but I almost wonder if we aren't better off to just sit back and wait and let's see what happens. This might be one that hits the chopping block. That's just a thought, and I understand.
Mr. Chairman, I defer to the wisdom of the committee.
I think Katie wants to speak to that issue.
I'll just say, Mr. Chairman, that I think Senator Black, your very concerns are why the first enactment clause was added on, so that if it does, quote, go to the chopping block, that this state statute would no longer be in effect. And then I believe that Senator Obenshain has suggested the Second Amendment that should federal funding not be provided to implement provisions of the federal law, that it would do that. So just to your point, because we've heard that loud and clear, and I think that my folks would also say that if it goes to the chopping block, then so does the state program.
You're very convincing. Thank you.
Senator Obenshain, your amendment, Scott is jotting it down. You ready to report it?
Mr. Chairman, it would be a fourth enactment clause, and it would say something along the lines of if federal funding is not provided to implement the provisions of the federal law, then this act would become invalid or would expire.
Not provided or the funds ceased to flow, something to that effect. That's one.
Properly moved and seconded that amendment be adopted. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, now go back to the penalty part. The amendment that Senator Obenshain was offering is
Right, funds 59 through 61.
And Mr. Chairman, we could certainly do that, and it would be best to do the whole thing as an amendment in the nature of a substitute, because we've got some cross references in there.
Is there a second to Senator Obenshain's? Second. Properly moved. All in favor say aye. Aye. Okay. So now we have a chopped up piece that Scott is going to try to substitute for the floor. Mr. Chairman, I defer. All right. This will be somewhere around the fifth amendment. This is the third from Senator Obenshain.
It's the fifth amendment, I've got to remain silent. The third was funds, fines collected under the fine provision shall be directed to the Clean Water Fund. I got to conflict with the first part of the bill that says the penalty is going to the ag civil penalty fund.
I want to change that.
Well, shouldn't we just take that entire section out?
I don't know.
You know, for what other reason
Well,
would it exist?
You may be right, I defer to council.
At this point, it might be best to allow Scott to take his, take it out of the week, let Scott clean it up. Is there any objection?
Can I make that in principle?
Principle, yes. That motion in principle. There was second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. So the bill, for the most part, is ready, but we make it clean, we will deal with it next week, okay? Is that agreeable? Y'all comfortable with the way it is? Is there a motion on the amendment? You want to make the motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the bill be reported as amended.
Properly moved and seconded. Any further discussion?
I'm going to abstain on this bill just because I think it needs to go to contested docket, just so we can remind, remember to read it. Oh, there we go. Okay.
I think you're gonna have some contested.
Okay, that's fine. All right, properly moved and seconded. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? That one.
McClellan's aye.
Rod Dance's aye. Kevin,
Thank you, Mr.
is
Chairman.
that what the last one?
I actually had two more.
Mr. Chairman, just to clarify,
We need to wait.
Yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Senate Bill 1224.
Give your attention to, I'm sorry, what, 24?
1224. Mr. Chairman, this bill provides that a landowner who has entered into an agreement with a public entity or a nonprofit that allows them to use their land for public recreation shall be immune from liability to that member of the public arising out of the use or recreation of the land. So we're giving immunity to the people who let public entities or not-for-profits use their land for public recreation, so the public can't sue that individual. And if we don't, we're going to have a hard time getting these people to let the public use that land. I'll try to answer this question.
And I do have a question. So if you give immunity to the landowner who allows the public entity to have an easement, the public entity can't be sued as a sovereign immunity, so basically there's no responsible party, correct?
Well, I don't do this kind of practice, so I can't get into the discussion of immunity and force and so forth and so on. But this issue comes as a result of some very creative trial lawyers.
They actually make any money, by the way?
That made a lot of money off this case. The problem is it quells landowners who are willing to let their land be used in coordination with DCR or DGF for public recreation. And we don't want to stop people from having this land for public recreation. So the least we can do is give them immunity so these trial lawyers don't sue them and take their land.
Mr. Chairman?
I know you don't like that saying.
It is, I would be fine with this if it dealt with ordinary negligence, but to exempt them from gross negligence, I think the bill says all liability, believes in all liability.
Well,
Mr. Chairman, Clyde Preston, Director of the Department of Conservation and Recreation, and I'm not a lawyer, so if you get into any legal questions, John Dennis from the Attorney General's office is here to help, but let me explain real simply to your point. If you look a little further down the bill, it says that the claim would have to be brought under the Virginia Tort Claims Act, and the Virginia Tort Claims Act explains the circumstances under which the state agency can be sued in limits of liability. So it's not saying that they can't bring any claim, it's just saying it would be subject to the Virginia Tort Claims Act. I would also point out that existing law says that the state agency shall indemnify the landowner, and because of the case that Senator Stewart referenced, what we found out is that that didn't really have much meaning because the landowner was kind of brought against the landowner. The state agency was doing the claim, and the claim was settled in an agreement, confidentiality agreement, but in the meantime, what we're trying to do is just to protect those landowners that are willing to allow the public access, at the same time saying they're immune and saying that if there's a case of gross negligence that would be brought against under the Virginia Tort Claims Act.
I'm going to struggle to use my Fairfax High School education here, but I've actually negotiated easement agreements, and if I say, Mr. Crispin, you want to use my property, that's fine. I want you to use it for your bike trail or what have you. But if there's a claim made from someone that gets injured because there's a pothole and it wasn't covered up, you're going to indemnify me. You're going to pay my legal costs. You're going to pay any damages. You're going to indemnify me. So I can sit there and have a milkshake and watch people go back and forth on the WOD, knowing that I'm fully protected because the Commonwealth of Virginia is not going anywhere. I can do that. I don't need the state legislature to negotiate that. I can do that myself. So why can't that apply here?
I think Mr. Daniel answered that question. What we found is that that wasn't the case.
That's what happened. I think they thought they could, and it didn't happen, and so there was a big jump.
Well, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, John Daniel with the Attorney General's office. Senator Peterson, I think you're probably exactly right. They could write easements that would have granted these public access but better than the ones that are in place now. The problem is we have to deal with the public confronted with as a result of this case, is we're dealing with the easements as we now have them. There are, I don't know how many, but there are a host of these opportunities that are created for public outdoor experiences, which may not be the world's perfect easement, and we could probably write better ones today, and we probably will in the future. But we have what we have, and in this case, through a series of creative lawyering, as Senator Stewart has said, and perhaps not the most artfully drawn easements, has resulted in where we are. What we think we're trying to do with this bill, and we is the collective we, which are the people who grant the easements, the agencies who now have to buy insurance at huge premium costs, and the public at large who enjoys the opportunities to get outdoors, is to put the popular law where we think it was supposed to be, which is it's not the landowner who gives up the right or creates the opportunity. It should go to the Tort Claims Act, which is one place where you have, in fact, in a limited circumstance, granted exception to the sovereign immunity of the Commonwealth. So it limits the Tort Claim Act, which this would be. In this case, again, creativity brought in an objection for those who managed the Tort Claim Act and the payments from it that this was a contract and not a tort. That too might be wrong, but we're simply here trying to rectify a circumstance that was a horrific situation and one that, in the long term, both outdoor opportunities and the possible to accommodate.
Any other questions? Bill, you look like you want to come on.
Mr. Chairman, Bill Murray on behalf of Dominion, I will confess this arose out of the recreational use of one of our facilities. And I think a key change, I call your attention on line 63, is striking person and inserting landowner. In Virginia, especially because we have such good land conservation policies, land is increasingly owned by an entity, whether it's a nonprofit or corporation, and not a specific person. Is my recollection as a non-lawyer of this case is the creative lawyering in part occasion from the difference between person and landowner. In other words, this is not a new public policy of if you grant an easement to the Commonwealth or some other public entity that you take advantage of the section. That was what folks thought the law was. And the Attorney General's office, or Clyde may remember it better, but I think the creative lawyering arose from the court's view of the difference between person and landowner, and that's what this is attempting to correct. And I will confess it was a very tragic situation involving a drowning at one of our facilities. We had leased to a state agency for purposes of basically public swimming, for lack of a better word, public recreation.
All right. Is there a motion? Move for. Second. Properly moved and second. Senate Bill 1224 will be reported. Is there anyone who wishes to speak in opposition to the bill? Hearing none. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? One no.
Chairman, the last bill I have is Senate Bill 1491. And, Mr. Chairman, this is from my perspective, is a clarification bill. Under the statute regarding agritourism, there's a whole list of things that you can do on agricultural property, farms, ranches, et cetera. And we encourage agritourism. Well, one of my constituents said, can I rent my farmhouse out in relation to the agritourism activities? And I looked at it and I said, well, I think you can, because tourism certainly denotes spending the night somewhere. And I guess this all arises as a result of the discussion of Airbnb. But what this bill would do was it allows you to rent your single-family residence, not a lodge, not a hotel, a single-family residence, a farmhouse on the ranch or the farm, but for not less than a week at a time. So this is not where they're coming in, it's not a bed and breakfast, it's not that sort of thing. You've got to rent it for a week as part of your agricultural experience. I think it's a clarification. I think you can already do it, but.
Okay. Any questions of that?
Question, Mr. Chairman? Could someone do this 52 times a year to different or the same people, week to week?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not aware, I think you can rent your house out. I think you can rent your house out if you want to rent it to somebody. I think the question becomes is if you become a B&B and you start renting it out for nightly. I'm not aware of any regulation under the law that says I can't rent my house to you for a year at a time or for 30 days at a time.
No,
but I'm no expert.
Mr. Chairman, yeah, I understand. We're going through the Airbnb issue, and one of the things
Please don't confuse this with Airbnb. This has nothing to do with Airbnb. This is farmers.
Land
Mr. Chairman, my only concern here is if these week to week you have any number of people coming on there, coming on and off, and what have you. Will this be regulated at some point in time like a business? If you were to do this?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I hope most of these farms and agritourism venues are businesses. We're trying to raise food and we're trying to raise money off of tourism in relation to raising produce and making wine and all these other things.
Mr. Chair. So would there be a mechanism to collect if there's a transient occupancy tax in the locality? They would certainly be expected to pay that, correct?
Mr. Chairman, in the bill on line 12, it says you have to comply with the applicable transient lodging taxes, so they've got to pay those. If the locality has it, they've got to be paid.
Mr. Chairman, one more, is there a mechanism for them to be, I understand, thank you for that. How would the locality know that they were doing it?
I guess, Mr. Chairman, I'm not an expert on how this is done, but I suspect it's just like anything else. If you are responsible to remit it to the locality, I don't know that there is any special mechanism. I'm not sure if this would be such an infrequent thing. I don't know that you could set up a special mechanism for it. You just hope that people do what they're supposed to do.
Further questions of that? Is anyone here in opposition to the bill? One up there.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm Larry Land, representing Virginia Association of Counties. I do want to thank Senator Stewart for considering our concerns. One of the top priorities of the Virginia Association of Counties in our legislative program is protection of local land use authority. We believe that this particular bill does reduce our local land use regulatory authority. As you may know, if you look at the bill, what this does, it expands the definition of an agritourism activity, which is basically a business. You might remember that about 3 sessions ago, this committee took an awful lot of time with legislation that dealt with the issue of agritourism activity. And we think that if you're going to change the definition, it has to be done with the utmost caution. Otherwise, we think that you could be facing some very unintended consequences. For instance, in the bill, there's basically a reference to, I believe it's single-family residence, and that's not defined. A single-family residence can be a very large structure. And it does make a reference to a minimum of 1 week that a customer would be renting space within the single-family residence, but you don't know how many people that single-family residence may be accommodating at one time. So you may be generating a lot of activity that you may not mean to be generated, which would be outside the purview of local zoning. As you recall, agricultural tourism activities, basically there are limits to the extent to which a local government may regulate that under its zoning powers. It cannot require a special use permit or special exception. So we have a concern about this, and so that's the reason why we oppose the bill. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, if I can just correct Larry on one thing, under what he just quoted, you can regulate it under the agritourism statute, but you can show an impact of health and safety. So that's one clarification.
That's right. I didn't mean to say you couldn't regulate it at all, but there are greater limits to the extent that you can regulate it compared to other zoning classifications.
Welcome.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Mike Polly-Groves with the Virginia Municipal League. I won't trespass on your time. I usually agree with everything that VECO has proposed to you with. It's their opposition. We agree with that, and we both of that. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anyone anybody else wish to speak in opposition to the bill? Anyone speak in support of the bill? You're on your own.
Mr. Chairman, I would only say that VECO, I don't think this is going to affect the municipal league because you don't have a whole lot of farms and ranches and incorporated towns and cities. And VECO, I'm not sure about, none of the counties that I represent object to this. I'm not sure that the rural counties object to this. You know, typically when we think of a farm or a ranch, we're thinking of a larger tract of land where you actually grow something. And that's where this, it's not trying to regulate subdivisions in Fairfax or Alexandria or anything like this. This is rural Virginia. But that's my bill.
Move to report.
Is there a motion?
Okay. Properly moved and second, the bill be reported. Any further questions? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? No. 40 votes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, Senator Rowe.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 953 is not legal. There seems to be no opposition to it. It redefines the code, the Virginia Criminal Law Division, to clarify that a muzzle loader is incorporated in the same part of the code as antique firearms, which puts it in pretty much in context with the federal statute on they do not consider muzzle loader as a firearm.
Any questions on that on this bill? Is there anybody who wants to speak in opposition? Second. Motion properly seconded. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Thank you, Senator Wright. Let's see, Senator Wagner is not here.
I have called Senator Vogel.
Okay. I think Senator Vogel was one of the first to go. regard to these bills. Senator Locke asked that Senate Bill 1471 go by for the day. We got objection that will go by for the day. Senator Steph asked that both of his bills go by for the day. And, let's see, that's 1143 and 1355. Without objection, those two will be passed by for the day. Senator Searle bills has three bills, 1383, 1398, 1399. Requested those go by for the day. Without objection, and Senator Vogel asked that Senate Bill 1529 go by for the day.
Mr. Chairman, I have Senate Bill 1496, and I don't know procedurally, I'll talk with Senator Locke about this. I would like mine to be rolled into her 1471. That's okay. They should be identical.
You want to pass that by for the day?
As it is, or roll it into her, yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I would move Senate Bill 1496 be rolled into Senate Bill 1471. Both being listed as code boxes.
You go back to the bill by for the day. Is there a second for that? Second. Most probably second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those no, the ayes have it. And then finally, Senator Vogel asked that Senate Bill 1582 be stricken from the docket without objection. Second? Second. Most probably second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Okay, there are no non-members. Senator Lewis? Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I've got Senate Bill 1518.
Senate Bill 1518.
Which I'm sure you all haven't heard anything about. It's a small little recycling bill. I don't want to trespass on the committee's time too much. As you can see, and as I'm sure you've heard, this bill aims to expand recycling in Virginia. It's looking to form a public-private working group under the auspices of DEQ to look at recycling in Virginia, recommend ways to expand for both litter reduction and also for beneficial use, a term which is defined in the bill. It's all to be accomplished by 10/1/2018 and recommends the use or promotes the use of public-private partnerships in accomplishing this act. It also amends the litter control program to include the encouragement of the beneficial use. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I know there are several people here, particularly I've got somebody here speaking in favor of the bill who has to check a claim at 4:30.
Senator Lewis, I believe there's a line amendment.
Yes, there are actually several amendments. I think the DEP, one of those ones. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, there are two amendments. The first one to Senate Bill 1518 would strike the definition of beneficial use, which appears on line 77, and it would replace it with this definition: a use that is of benefit as a substitute for natural or commercial products and does not contribute to adverse effects on health or environment. And the second amendment is on line 158. It would, after the word recommendations, would strike the phrase "for the increase of such rates," and it would insert "to improve the reliability of the supply of recycled materials."
Is there a motion on those amendments? Motion properly seconded. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Ayes have it. Okay. Those line amendments. Before we move to your speakers, does anybody have a question in favor of this? Not, then if you'd like to bring yourself started.
Mr. Chairman, Brett Massey, President and CEO of the Virginia Manufacturers Association. Thank you for the time. I want to thank the Patriot for bringing this bill forward. We know that this is a difficult subject. This code section hadn't been amended in 15 years. There are obvious reasons why. But what we want to do is give you a little context, and then with the indulgence of the chair, we do have two speakers, one from the plastics industry, a plastic bag manufacturer, so you can hear from them, and a bottle manufacturer. we wanted you to hear directly from them how beneficial use plays into the manufacturing environment. But let me give the context. What we have observed is year after year, two things: proliferation of efforts to ban things and tax things because we're dealing with after effects of products, everything from bottles to bags to cans. Second thing is, in our industry, beneficial use is a very important term of art because we oftentimes have to have post-consumer waste in our raw materials, as a raw material into our products, particularly in packaging. Getting at that supply and improving that supply, both not necessarily the volume, but certainly the quality, is something that's very important. And right now you're going to hear from some folks that have to actually import these products in order to make theirs. We think that we can do it better if we have everybody at the table working for the common goal of market-based, not mandate-based, incentive-based, not tax and spend-based, opportunities where we all are trying to find out a way to, one, improve beneficial use, two, a byproduct of bags, perhaps improve our situation with some public litter that is growing in Virginia, and three, public education about the whole thing, how it works together, because beneficial use is a very specific part of recycling. So this bill takes a very modest approach. We have made great efforts through all last year, working with the coalition of manufacturers, with the retailers, of which you will hear from the Retail Federation, and we also engage VACO in this process because we think local government is essential to this solution. So, Mr. Chairman, we're not saying that this bill is perfect. It's a stripped-down version that just gets all of us at the table to try to come up with a working solution. We feel like this was the best way to do it because we've been successful with this approach, with DEQ's guidance, being able to put this forward. For instance, this year we were able to work in this same sort of fashion on groundwater withdrawal. We were able to work with it on nutrient reductions. We have a long history of trying to work through very complicated issues like this as a group. So this is all our intent, is to get this together and codify beneficial use. So, Mr. Chairman, with that, I have Mark Daniels, if you would, with the Novolex Corporation.
If you'd like to speak in support, please come up. I do remind folks that we adhere to 5 minutes on each side rule, so we just ask you to be respectful to the folks who might like to speak on it.
Certainly, Mr. Chair, I appreciate that. Good afternoon, and to you, the members of the committee. I appreciate you meeting me here today to listen to my testimony. I'm Mark Daniels. I'm the Senior Vice President of Sustainability and Environmental Policy for a company named Novolex. We are a leading manufacturer of flexible packaging in the United States. We have 7,000 employees across 49 facilities in North America, including a plastic retail bag manufacturing recycling facility, employing over 100 people right here in Richmond, Virginia. We fully support SB 1518, and we'd like to thank Senator Lewis for fostering his leadership through this legislation. By expanding the scope of recycling programs supported by the DEQ and elevating public awareness partnerships in the effort to increase recycling rates, SB 1518 will encourage continual pioneering and advancements in recycling and sustainability. Today, with help from private industry and investment partnerships, more than 90% of Americans have access to a countrywide network of plastic bag, film, and wrap recycling. It's one of the fastest growing categories in the recycling sector in the United States. It's improved by 80% over the last several years to now it's over 1.1 billion pounds recycled. We're about to be the first to develop the first truly closed-loop recycling facility. It's in North Vernon, Indiana. We acquired another closed-loop facility in Wisconsin, and now we're reprocessing 50 million pounds of post-consumer and post-industrial waste. We reprocess that material, we clean it, and we manufacture new plastic bags out of that, right here in Richmond. We work with the grocery stores. We put together return bins in front of the grocery stores. We've developed over 30,000 pickup locations where you can bring back all kinds of plastic bags and films. There's 75 locations within 15 miles of where I stand today where you can do that. I think it's important to note that not only do we take back retail plastic bags, but we take back newspaper bags, rice mini bags, bread bags, cereal bags, and you get a case of water and a wrap around it. It's all polyethylene. It can all be commingled. We buy that material, and then we reprocess it and make new bags out of that. As I said before, these feedstocks of production of other plastic bags, so we can manufacture bags with 50 to 75% recycled content in them. Other companies in Virginia, like Trex, also have the same kind of program where they're making composite lumber. They're a lot bigger than we are. They're probably getting 300 to 400 million pounds of this material. So SB 1518 encourages the expansion of these programs to other build products, opens the door to additional Virginia job creation, continued investment in resale recycling partnerships, and creative advancements in recycled content manufacturing will drive the race to higher levels. So thank you for your consideration and support of 1518, and I'm happy to answer any questions they may have.
Thank you. Do you all wish to register your support for the bill too? Thank you. If you can just say your name, who you represent, and you can support it now, we've actually run out of time.
Sure. My name is Mike Smaha. I'm here on behalf of Owens, Illinois, global manufacturer. 2 plants here in Virginia, 1 in Toronto, 1 outside Danville. We're here in support of the bill. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Kate Baker with the Virginia Retail Federation, and we support this bill as well. We think it's a step in the right direction in improving recycling in Virginia.
Thank you. Anyone else who wanted to register their support? Just say who you represent, Larry.
Larry Lamb, Virginia Association of Counties. I want to thank Senator Lewis and the Virginia Manufacturers Association for including us in discussions on this bill. We are supportive. I have talked a little bit about comments that we did receive in a provision on line 65 about the reporting intervals, but I'm sure that we can work on that, but I just want to register our support for the bill. Thank you.
Anyone else who wishes to register their support? Not, are there those that would like to speak in opposition to it?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. My name is Chuck DeVall, and I'm speaking on behalf of retailers, manufacturers, and wholesalers in opposition to the bill. We're not in opposition to the concept, we're in opposition to the bill and the way it's been presented. Some retailers have been consulted, some members of government have been consulted, some manufacturers, these 2 have been consulted, but the people that pay the taxes into the Litter Control and Recycling Fund, which I guess my gray hair will give you a little historical perspective, which was passed in the late 1970s, was a volunteer tax imposed, that the industry imposed upon itself. Beer wholesalers, soft drink distributors, and retailers pay into that fund. It jumps up about $1.9 million a year. Last year, it went back to your constituents 95%. And as a result of that, it generated almost $24 million in additional revenue and labor. And I don't know any other program in the state that has any state money involved that produces those kind of results. The thing that's missing here, and we get right to the point of it, is all the people that are in this puzzle can get together around the table and try to work through the problem. We don't have to have state government involved in this. We don't have to have PDQ involved in this. If VMA wants to look at solving the problem, just call a meeting. We'll be glad to attend. There are a lot of other groups here that can speak to this, but the bottom line is just that. Give the industry a chance to work around the table. We'll give you an answer. We'll come back here if we need legislative help and ask for your help. That's basically the bottom line.
Thank you. Please come up if you'd like to speak now.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Tim Hayes, and I'm here on behalf of the Virginia Waste Industries Association. The Waste Industries Association represents most of the private waste haulers and disposal companies that operate in Virginia, and they're very deeply involved in recycling at every level. This bill is well intended. There's some things in this bill that don't look too bad, but the Waste Industries Association and the waste industry operatives in Virginia really need to be involved in this. They were not involved in the development of this bill. And as I understand, as Mr. Duvall said, they're quite happy to help out with any changes or anything that might be necessary, but we just don't think at this point that it's appropriate, and we oppose the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else who'd like to speak in opposition? Please come up.
Just briefly, Mr. Chairman, Michael O'Connor, representing Virginia's petroleum marketers and convenience store operators. 2 quick points. Part of this bill says that you shall work with the industry and local governments to promote the concept of beneficial use. And then you look down to the definition of beneficial use in line 78, and one of those beneficial uses is as a fuel substitute. And I'm not sure how that's defined, but it's going to be defined replacing gasoline and diesel that contribute $650 million to the Transportation Trust Fund for propane that employs about 2,400 Virginians. Finally, last point I'd make, I am the representative on this aforementioned Recycling Fund Advisory Board, and the first I heard about this bill was the second day of the session.
Thank you. Understood. Anyone else?
Just got a text, the representative from the International Paper and the American Paper Products Association wanted me to say that they were opposed to it. They couldn't make the meeting.
Thank you. Anyone else who'd like to speak in opposition? Right, if not, is there a question of the paper?
Mr. Chairman, I can probably truncate this for you a little bit. I'll give you about a minute and 30 seconds. And Mr. Chairman, as you can see, I understand short session. Section hadn't been amended in 15 years. It is Virginia. Although I think, as you can tell, there's some merits, even the opposition, Mr. McCall and Mr. Hayes indicated there's some merit to this. So I understand the need. People are uneasy doing something like this in a short session. But I think we started the conversation. So what I would ask the committee to consider, and I guess as a member of the committee, maybe I can make the motion, I would move that the bill be PBI'd, but with a letter, if the chairman would, to DEQ to encourage them to facilitate this convening of these stakeholders to discuss this policy, which they all seem willing to do.
Do we need DEQ to facilitate the stakeholder meeting? I'm not opposed to that, but do you need DEQ to facilitate?
I just don't think it would hurt.
Mr. Chairman, who else would possibly do it?
Perhaps the stakeholders to meet themselves.
That would be my thought.
I just think it would add some impetus to the meeting. I understand that everybody seems willing to do it.
How about if we ask DEQ to be present rather than be responsible for convening all these folks? Just to be present, maybe help with technical expertise.
That's fine. That's fine.
Was that? I seconded. Is that your motion? Is there a second to that? Motion to PBI the bill with a letter to DEQ to ask them to assist with their stakeholder meetings for technical experience. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Yes.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Stanley. No, that was a question. Everybody was up. Senator Wagner? Sorry, you were supposed to go first and you're late.
Well, you just started early, Mr. Chairman. I couldn't possibly have been late. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I Senate Bill 1395.
Senate Bill 1395.
Mr. Chairman, about 10 years ago, 11 years ago, we really wanted to encourage the implementation of renewable energy projects around the Commonwealth, and we moved forward with legislation that basically directed DEQ to set up a permit by rule for the issuance of renewable energy projects from 100 megawatts or less. I believe it started at 50, and then a few years later was raised to 100. Now we're coming back this year for just solar and wind projects, raising that up to 150 megawatts, which would be a permit by rule. This came as a result of, we've had a group of stakeholders that have been meeting all summer long. They've probably had 10 or 12 meetings from the time we adjourned last year, right up until right before we adjourned this year. Worked out a number of compromise bills. Most of these bills have been heard and moved forward and comments are made with, but this is one bill that showed up under your committee, Mr. Chairman, because it does deal with permits.
You want me to refer to them?
No, it's fine here. It can come right out of here, and I think if you look through it, what we're trying to do is actually help implement more larger scale solar and wind projects. So these renewable projects have a permit by rule as opposed to having to go through formal SCC hearings and the obstacles that can prevent, the time delays, and obviously the added cost to these projects that make what might be feasible unfeasible at some point in time or not. So I think that's what it basically does. It also does have a look back provision because there's been some of these projects that have been put in place, and so it does have a look back provision. If you go to line 101 online, back to those that might have started or be implemented or underway by 1 July 2017. And it does state that utility covered projects costs are not covered So, yeah, that's basically the bill, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to answer the questions.
That would be the substitute, Senator.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
That's what the substitute is. And,
Absolutely.
Senator Ruff moves and Senator Peterson seconds, the substitute be adopted. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Substitutes properly before us. Are there any questions of Senator Wagner?
I can bring a host up here, Mr. Chairman, from all sides. The investor-owned utilities are here, those in the industry are here.
I don't know that you need it, Senator Wagner.
They're all up and ready to go.
Okay.
Who do you need to talk to, Senator Peterson?
Mitch?
No, I don't have any.
Oh, is there any opposition first? Okay. No opposition to the bill.
I haven't even read, I was looking for a substitute.
I was going to say, have you read it yet? No opposition. No opposition.
I would move the substitute be reported. Second.
Motion properly seconded. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no.
Me and Black. No, just Black and me. Hanger and Chafin.
You got Nancy. Stanley and Overchamber, yes.
I look forward to explaining this on the floor, Mr. Chairman.
Short and sweet. Thank you, Senator. Senator Step?
Chairman, if I may, if we could have done instead of a biweekly day, a temporary, it seems we have.
You had one bill.
11:43 and a straight 13:55. So we have everybody on board.
Is there any other members that have bills? Senator Steph, what bill did you want to strike?
Well, no, we still want to get 11:43 first, so we'll do all the next week.
Any other members that have bills left? None.